I'd like to share some thoughts on meditation. You could just listen, have any reflection on these thoughts, you could provide them. If not, then you could just be silent. But I've been reading a book from Osho, and I continuously read more to try to learn more about the meditation, try to get better at it. Some interesting teachings that I came across that I wanted to share is that he made me see it from a different outlook, where before I normally say, okay, you want to master your mind, be able to control your mind. So kind of like a light switch, turn it on and off, use it when you need it, turn it off when you don't need it, right? And he was mentioning how it's obvious that if somebody has a big, strong ego, that's like having a very strong mind. And we know that in meditation, we want to learn to understand this mind, understand this ego, control this ego. But there are people who jump on the opposite end, and then they're known as like great people because they're humble. So he was mentioning this, where how people be like, oh, that person is such a humble person. He's a humble man. But what Osho was mentioning is that it's basically putting the ego upside down. It's like doing a headstand. Instead of standing upright, the ego is now doing a headstand. So it's still the ego, but it's just expressed in a humble, modest way. So like humbleness that is where the ego is saying, hey, let me become special because I'm seen as a humble person. That's still another strong expression of the ego. So you got the arrogant ego, and now you got the humble ego. Now he's also mentioning, imagine like a dark room, or you're outside and it's dark, and then you see something on the floor, on the road, and then you jump up and you get scared because you see a snake. But then imagine there's a light. Now there's a light, and you look down and you see that it's not really a snake, but it's a rope. So you thought that something was real when it was not. So he was explaining how that's kind of how the ego is. Like, it really doesn't exist. And when you have light and you could actually see this and you understand this, then you pretty much become awakened to that. You see that it doesn't exist. It's not just about controlling it and saying, okay, let me master it. But if you have this understanding to really see that it doesn't exist, that's something else. So then you merge into the totality, and you don't see yourself as separate. So then you can't really think that you're humble because you see that the I is merged into the whole and you are not separate. So there's nothing to be humble, nothing to be arrogant. You're just part of the whole.
struggling with, he was cheated on by his wife, since been divorced. Kind of got himself together now, doing really well. Been able to let go of a lot of things, but he was talking to me today, this has been a couple of years now, he was just like, I just can't seem to let go of this feeling of wanting to beat the shit out of this guy that was, fucking around with my wife. And he's like, just where I come from, that just doesn't happen. I'm from some part of Philly, and we fight like that kind of thing just doesn't happen. And he's just really having this internal battle, because then there's this part of him too that's rational and humble, and I know that's not going to do anybody any good, and it's not going to help, it's not going to make me feel better, it's not going to change anything, but I still just want to kick his ass. And I was talking to him, not quite as eloquently as Osho put it, but something along the lines of him not being either or, not just bowing down and acting like nothing happened and not going and beating the crap out of this guy, but how does he honor both of those parts of himself, where he can recognize that both of those are actually being driven by something else, which is not him, which is ego. We'll be talking about ego today. And it took me, like an hour to going back and forth to kind of like get there, but what you just said in about 3 minutes was really, it just made me think about the session this morning. It just seemed like really relevant. Trying to be able to balance, recognizing the ego and how that, I'll use the word like deploy, like it sends out these parts of ourselves, like angry part or like revenge part, or even really interesting, this kind of humble, oh, look at me, look how cool and smooth I am, and how chill I am, and nothing bothers me. And then, but seeing that both of those are egos is really profound. I like that.
Yeah, I've been reading his books for many years, and that teaching really stood out to me. Because I've always mentioned, and he's mentioned in his other books too, where you can master the mind, control it, turn it on and off. Let's say you turn it on, that's like arrogance. You turn it off, that's like humbleness. And then this whole other teaching is just seeing that it doesn't even exist. And that's a whole different way of seeing it. And I've seen it happen with people that I interact with, people that I train. I've seen it firsthand through experience. Obviously, I know the ego with arrogance. We see it all the time. Everybody calls them narcissists or whatever the case. But there's a very, very strong ego within people, within ourselves, that's masked through humbleness and modesty. I think it's a great thing to understand both how they interrelate and how it's the same thing. And like you said, just flipped upside down.
Yeah, I really, really like that. Flipping it upside down, it's still there, you just flipped it.
Yes.
That makes it very visual. I'm a visual person, so seeing it that way is really kind of clicked.
And the story with the snake really makes sense to me.
Yeah.
It's like we believe something really exists. We truly do. And then it's like a person, when they see a snake, they jump. They get scared, like, oh my God, it's a snake. But if there's light and you know it's not a snake, it's just a piece of rope, then you approach the situation completely differently, because you know that it's really not a snake. But then say 99% of everybody around you, they really think it's a snake. And those are like the people who really feel that the ego is real, like it's them, like that's who they are, it's this ego. But an awakened person knows that the ego just doesn't even exist, it's not even real. And that's very uncommon for somebody to come to that deep understanding. You know, that's like what Buddha, that's like a Buddha right there. Few people who come to that deep understanding. It's like the more of the majority around you tells you something that's real, the more it makes you feel like it is real, to make you believe that. But through experience, through understanding, if you see that it's not real, you see it for yourself, then that could change your life. Just from that simple understanding.